draw points on the petals, but I drew an extra one right here just because some daisies don't have points on the petals depending on the type of daisy. So I did an example right here that you can reference, just a simple quick drawing so that you can see how the daisies don't always have points. So that's just an adjustment in petals. But tonight we're going to talk about foreshortening. So, and we're going to use a daisy to do that. So foreshortening, I've discussed this in other classes, but foreshortening is where what is close to you is drawn very shortly or small. So if I put my hand, let's see, if I put, if I put my hand like that, you see how long my fingers aren't that long, even though they really are that long. So you would have to draw them where you only saw part of them. So the tips, you'd see the tips, and then this would be very short. So that is called foreshortening, F-O-R-E, and then shortening. So we're going to do that with our petals. So if you notice how short these petals, it's because they're coming right at you. Sorry, my camera is really funny. So though they're coming right at you, and then they're long. Or over here where that's behind, that's not exactly foreshortening, but it's a similar concept where they go behind. So again, this is just my reference sketch. You don't have to see this. You need to pay attention over here. Have your pencils, your paper. I'm going to draw shapes as always. When we draw shapes, be sure and draw those lightly. So if I say draw an oval, we're going to fill that in with a flower, and then we're going to erase some of those lines. My lines are going to be dark so you can see them. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to do this top one right here. The center of the daisy is kind of has some dimension to it. So right over here, off to this side, make sure your paper is in portrait mode, which means the sides are longer than the top and bottom. It's standing vertically. So we're going to do this in a portrait mode. And then we're going to draw the center of the daisy first. So what I want you to do is draw something that looks a little bit like the first bow of a rainbow. And then we're going to add a little curvature. It should look a little bit like a gumdrop or a little, I'm trying to think of another candy that does that. Really gumdrop.
Lemon drop.
Lemon drop. There you go. A lemon drop. That's good. So what we will do is, sorry, I had to flip that. So we're going to draw that. And then in the very top, we're going to put a little circle right here. There's a hollow in the center where it indents a little bit. So we're going to put that circle in our gumdrop. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make it, it's going to look kind of like an egg, like a fried egg. So what I want you to do is I want you to draw an oval, and we're going to be close at the top. We're going to come around just like this and be fuller at the bottom. It might even look a little bit like a spaceship, but it reminded me of a fried egg or a spaceship, whatever you want it to be. But notice how much space we have here and then how close it is there. Because when we're viewing the flower, these petals we're only seeing part of them. When we do this, we'll be doing foreshortening. We see the whole petal, but we see it from this angle. So I want you to do that. Now remember, this shape is light because you're going to be erasing it. So now we get to put our petals in. You're going to start with a narrower point, and then you're going to come out and come back to a point. So we're going to start in here, draw a line to about the tip of our spaceship or our fried egg, and come back. Now notice my lines are closer together than further apart than to a point here. So I'm doing this, almost like an elongated football. And it doesn't even have to touch, it just needs to be closer at this point than it is at this point, and then to a point right there. So we're going to repeat that around, leaving a little bit of a space. And the nice thing is your lines don't have to go like this. They can go like this. They can have a little movement. It's a flower, so it's organic. And we're gonna go around our flower, going to the end of our egg or our spaceship. And I'm gonna go all across the front here and out to the sides. And then as I go to the back, this is where it's not going to come to a point. It's going to be a little bit squared. It's not this petal. It's because we can't see the point. The point falls off our horizon. So we're going to come, and when we get to the edge of that circle, see how we have this is a pointed, but as we go around to this shorter area, we're going to come in like that. So you're going basically, this is your shape now back here. And then as I come in, it's longer. So you should have those petals all the way around. Anytime you want to take a flower or any object that has something that could tilt. So, let's say I'm going to use this as a circle, but it could tilt. See how the center? So I could tilt this way. This is where you're going to have it. You're going to have that oval, and then that center is either going to be closer to you or further away. And that's how you give the perspective, the way it actually looks in real life. That's how you draw that. Now we've got to fill in. The daisies have lots of petals. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill in between, and we just put it behind like this. So you might have a little line at the top. And we're just filling in those spaces. So, and the petals don't always have to end in a point like this. Sometimes, because it's natural, they have a little bit of a jagged edge like that. So I'll do a little bit bigger one. They might end like this. You see how you have that little lumpity bump. So you can kind of, depending on how your pencil falls, you may just do it naturally. Or if it's easier for you to just do points, you can do points all the way around until you get to the back. Even when you fill in this area, they're still flat until they get over. Okay, now your point here, your point, would be that you would erase this part of your picture so that where that fried egg or that spaceship was, you can remove that, or you can wait till you're done. But anytime, that guideline that we put out for ourselves, so we would know how to space our petals apart from the center, you can erase that if you want. I'm going to leave mine on there just because it's in charcoal, and that's where it's going to go. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this hover in space, because I guess it's a spaceship, but I don't want to put my stems yet because I want to put this flower stem at the very front. So when we're drawing something that's going to be in the front and we need to stick things behind it, you can do that two ways. You can wait, like we're going to do, and do anything that's in the front and then layer behind, just like we did with these petals. Or you can draw your lines and then erase those little bits. So we're going to do these two flowers first, then we're going to draw our stems to our flowers. So right here, we've got another center to our daisy. So I'm going to place it over here on my paper because I don't necessarily need the petals to touch. And I'm going to put, remember this gumdrop center? We're going to put that gumdrop center right here. This one face that way. This one, I'm going to face this way. Same thing, come around in a circle like that. So this one looked like the top of a rainbow, or the first bow of a rainbow, and then a slight smile, first bow of a rainbow, and then a slight smile right there. And then remember, there's a little indentation, kind of like a note to ourselves, a note to an artist. And then we've got to make it into a fried egg or a spaceship. But this time, we're going to do it where our space is closer right here. So I'm going to come very narrow, and then I'm going to go up very high. Okay. So it's significantly different, but it's still the same idea. This one, I really want to see a lot of my petals. So I've made this area larger and this area pretty tight. I'm going to go outside of this circle. But again, this is a guideline to remind me how it's going to look. It looks really funny right now. Like that doesn't look like how a flower would look. But when we put, oh, I'm going to sneeze. Phew. Sorry, I think I looked right into the light. So we're going to go around and these petals are going to be just the little points, as though all I see are the fingernails in a way. If you think of the hand coming right at you, maybe you see that much. So to make this easy and really make sense, we're going to start at the back because you've done the pointy petals. So we've got our gumdrop, our big spaceship or fried egg guideline, and I'm going to start back here and I'm going to come up, same idea with our point, and then come back in. Same idea with our point. And we're moving around like a radius, kind of like the sun, if you think of it that way. Okay, all the way over to here. Now I'm going to go out a little bit. I'm going to do it this way. All the way over here. Okay, so we've got those petals that are on this side right here, like this. Now I'm just going to see the points. So here where we couldn't see the points and we just see the top part of the petal, this is the opposite. We're going to see the points. So what we're going to do is basically you're just drawing a point right here and it's going to be wider. These were very narrow. This is going to be wider. So we're going to give it a little bit of point like that. Point, and then as it gets over, a point. Now, it doesn't look quite right yet, so I'm going to give you some tips on how to round that out. To make these petals, when they're coming out at you, they're actually going to come into the gumdrop. So what we do is we bring that up. That actually comes up into the gumdrop and forms this area. That gives it more that's coming up at you like that. The other thing that happens here is you see a little bit of the bottom of the flower. So what I'm going to do is right here, this is the bottom of the flower. I'm going to bring this down like this. And then our stem is going to come off of here. So I'll just do that so I know there's a note. And now we're going to fill in petals. Same idea. We're going to put them in the middle of the other spaces. Just like that. Same idea coming out. This concept is kind of a difficult one to see, but it should make sense once you do it a couple different ways. And so we will revisit this with some other flowers, but it's that foreshortening idea kind of gets you. And actually, it probably even will come out a little bit more on these ends just because I can. So, okay. So you can erase these guidelines right there. And you can erase these little bits where your gumdrop was. Oh, I'm going to fill in a little. Maybe we'll add a little bit of some in between there. But that way, when we shade these, it'll make a little more sense, and because we'll darken in that center and give it some shadowing to push it away from us. So I'm going to go ahead and put this stem in. So I'm going to so all I'm going to do is draw a line to the bottom of my paper and then draw one right next to it. And you can have it go, I'm having mine go that way. Really, these are your flowers. They can go any way you need to put them. So we've got the stem going that way. And since I have that, I'm going to go ahead and put the stem to this one, and I'm going to go behind this one, just like this. So I draw one line. That way it's behind, and then I'm going to draw a line right next to it.
Excuse me, I have a tornado warning,
Oh no,
so I may
Mary,
disappear.
Mary, why don't you go and I'll get you the recording, okay? When it goes
Okay.
out. Please be very safe.
I will.
We are in the land where the tornadoes have been hitting really hard. So please be very, very careful. Go shelter. Okay, so let's get back. Now we've got our two stems right here. Now we're going to draw our little buds. Okay, you ready to go? We need new daisies to bloom. So we're going to draw the buds. I have two different buds, a tight bud and a bud that's slightly open. So to do the buds, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a little, almost like a little cup, just like that, or a little smile, a little smiley face. And then I'm going to make it, give it a little uneven edge. So it looked like a little flower on its own. I'll make it a little closer for you. So it'll look like this. So we had a little smiley face, and then we've got a little edge like that. Then we're going to top it with almost a triangle shape or a pointed edge there. So just like this, looks like a little egg in a way, doesn't it? With a point at the top. And then just give me lines as though the petals have folded on there like that. And you have a little bud. Then what we're going to do is just a little, almost a neck to your bud. You see that right there? And then go ahead and give it a stem. To do the stem, you just draw one line and draw another line right next to it. Okay. We're going to do the same thing. So we're going to draw our little cup like that, our smiley face with our little cup. And then we're going to do basically petals like that. What do I mean? Let's draw a smile over here. Looks more like a U, so you can think of it. Whatever I try to describe when I'm drawing things in shapes and lines that might be familiar to you, so that it helps you think about the right angles and the right shapes. So, okay, then we're going to give it a little, almost looks like a little flower, just like that. But this time, instead of the point like an egg, we're going to draw the petals. We're just going to keep them tightly together. So to look like that, we're just going to draw petals that go like this. See how I'm making those points? I'm basically doing this shape again and just drawing it in like that. So it's as though these were like this, and then they just open up a little bit. Now, to get that concept of things layering in a drawing, we're going to try, I did mine a little far apart, but we're going to give it a little neck. And then I'm going to try and make that stem go all the way so it comes behind here. You don't have to do that, but just to remind you of putting things behind and in front. That's how you get that layered look. We're going to do that. Guys, you've got some daisies growing. Now we're just going to do the leaves. So the leaves are a shape like this. Last week we went in, out, in, out. Now we're really going out and in. It's almost as though each one is an individual petal, but you're not going all the way to the base. So this comes very naturally to me. So I'm going to do one, and I'm just going to do it organically. And I want you to try it off of your paper. So I want you to, not off of your paper, but kind of away from your daisies. You don't have to stick it in your drawing just yet, but you can do it as a practice, or you can just watch me if you want. So to do the leaf, you're coming in or out, then in, out, then in, and then I come to the top, in, then out, in, then out, and back like that. So it doesn't matter if your shapes are equal. This is a flower, this is nature. Shapes are all different. Even often leaves are not symmetrical. So we're going to try that idea. Let's go ahead and come up here and I'm going to draw a little stem off of here. Again, any stem is going to be just 2 lines parallel going the same direction. And then we're going to try it. So we're going to go out, in, out, and in, out. Oh, we're at our top. So we're coming back around, back again, and back like that. And then you can give it a little bit of line and you can give it a few little veins if you want. And we're going to do this a couple times. So you kind of, you're starting to work on muscle memory with your hand of that organic shape, because a lot of leaves have a lot of similarities. So let's see, I got sneaky on you and was doing in front of and behind. You ready to try that? If it throws you off, don't do it. You can do it. I mean, still do the leaf, but don't worry about tucking it behind. So I'm going to do it over here and I'm going to tuck it behind. So there's my little stem. And then I'm going to come out, in, out, in, up, and then in, out. Oh, now I'm going behind. Look what happens. I come behind that stem. It's all position placement. So now the more I layer my picture, the more dimensional it will look. All right, let's throw another leaf in there. I'm going to tuck it over here so you don't have to make it go behind, but if you want to place it somewhere else on your stem and have it layer in, do it. Okay, here we go. We're out, in, out, in, up to the top. Oh, I told you I wasn't going to layer it, but look, oh, I got a piece right there that's going to go behind. Okay. There we go. Let's do our lines. Now we're going to do just a half leaf. It's the exact same idea. We only come all the way and then we're going to bring it right back. How does that look? Let's try it. We're going to draw a little stem off. Now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go out, in, just like I'm doing that other side. And when I come up to the top, I'm going to stop it halfway and then look, I just draw my line back. There you go. So that's how you do a half leaf. There are other ways that we can kind of do a, so it looks like it's folding over. That's a very simple technique. We'll do this more in other flowers. But to do that, I just put a little line next to it. That's all I did. So if my leaf was here, in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out, like this. If I do a little line right here, it gives it that look. Oh, sorry, guys, it's up at the top. It gives it that look of folding over. And then when we shade it, it looks like it's coming over. So we'll do that on petals on other flowers, but we're not worried about that much today. I really want you to get the idea of a little bit of that foreshortening, how to make those petals shorter and then the petals longer so that you are able to do that. This applies to anything that looks that way. So you can use this in your drawing, whether you're drawing a flower or whether you're drawing something else. It could be a plate of food or a bowl or whatever else you find with your sketchbook. So, okay, well, pretty much you've accomplished all we need to do to get our, I feel like I need something right here. So I'm gonna add a quick half leaf. How about that? Come up, out, out, in, out, in. So now let's talk a little bit about shading. You have just drawn 2 different daisies with different aspects. One is moving away from you, the other has foreshortening coming to you, and you've done 2 different types of buds. Give yourself a pat on the back and say you are awesome, because you are. And here you go. Then I want you to start thinking about shading. So now is the time that if you want to erase any of these guidelines. If you haven't already, you can go ahead and do that. You want to try, typically, if you're going to do some erasing on your paper, to erase those guidelines before you do your shading. You don't have to, but it will make life much easier on you, just in case you get into shading and the guideline falls in a spot that you don't want shading. The other thing is it also gives you the opportunity to erase before you have too much graphite on your paper. You have not put too much medium. The more medium you have, so the more pencil lead or the more charcoal, the more difficult it is to erase. So that's why you usually erase when you have your sketch down. Doesn't mean you can't erase. There are all sorts of techniques, but it's just a helpful tip. With that being said, I'm going to leave mine on there, and we may move pretty quickly through this. So, you ready to go? Let's do it. So I've got, just because I know that y'all are amazing and you're going to take this on, but I'm most worried about getting these shaded correctly. How are they going to look? This one's a little bit simpler, so we're going to start with that one. Right here, we always shade anything that is hidden or underneath something or layered. When you have overlapping like this, see how there's a shadow on my finger? That means you would shade that shadow. So that's what we're looking for. So obviously any petals that are underneath are going to be shaded. So what we're going to do is right along our gumdrop, any of those petals that are underneath, we're going to go ahead and just shade right up against the gumdrop. That includes around the back, just very lightly. I don't want too much, but I really want us to start getting that note that that is shaded right there. So just a little bit. But do you see how subtle that is? I'm just coming in and just putting a little bit right up against, a little more on the front, but right up against where those petals, so they're the last petals we drew because they're the petals that we're right up against. So I'm going to shade out a little bit more now that we're getting that idea. And I don't want to shade too much in the back, but I do want to make sure I'm shading pretty well in the front. But I still, all that being said, you still want to shade a little bit because you want to shade a little bit all around. See how it starts popping that gumdrop to the front? I'm just shading a little bit on those under petals. More on the front because we've got more petal to put it on. And less on the back, but still any of those petals that you did second. Okay? The under petals. So look already what happens. Where it's darker, it almost makes the gumdrop look like it's floating. So that at least sets this apart. So we're going to address that center part, and then we'll have the relationship to see what else we need to do on the petals. So since this is an indentation, this is going to be darker. So go ahead and darken that in, that little center part of our spaceship or our egg. We're going to darken that in. And then we're going to do this. We're going to use lines to create a contour shape. So when I use the word contour, it's usually an outline, it's a type of line, it's a shape, it's a direction. So it can be used lots of different ways. When I call it a contour line, it's kind of what we're doing, the outline of an object. But a contour line in topography, which is like if you did a 3D map, also shows the shape of something dimensionally. So like if you were going over a mountain or a hill. So we're going to use that idea and we're going to put it on this because there's texture on our gumdrop center. So what do I mean? I'm going to take a line and I'm going to go to put my pencil right in the center and I'm going to curve it around like that. See how it's not just straight, it's got a little bit of a curve. And I'm going to curve it around all from the center, almost like a pinwheel. Okay, look what I'm doing. So we're going to go all the way around, all the way around. So notice how it has that curve. So what it's doing is it's letting us know that that's not a flat shape. And it's also letting us know that it's not a hard edge. It's got a soft edge. So you've got kind of this pinwheel shape. Now here's where it gets confusing. We're going to do the same thing, but the opposite direction to give us a crisscross. So you ready? So I'm going to start right in the middle, and I'm going to do the same thing, a little bit of a curved line. It's wider at the bottom, and I'm going to go all the way around. Same idea, but we're crisscrossing our lines. You see how it makes that pattern? So I'll just show you again. This is what we did. Here's our gumdrop, like this. Here's our center, dark. You think of like a pinwheel or a peppermint candy. It's going around like that. See that? And then we go the opposite way, like this. There we go. And you create this center. Okie doke. Now we're going to shade it in a little bit. And I just want you to shade the whole thing lightly. This is pretty dark in the flower. Make sure your little center is dark. It's pretty dark in the flower, but I don't want to get it too dark in my drawing. And you don't want to get it darker than your texture lines that you put in there. Okay. So I will still want to be able to see my lines, but I don't want it to be the color of the paper. I want to darken it up. See what happens? We start seeing it. Now along the bottom, I'm just going to edge up a little bit. So what I'm doing is I'm coloring it like this, so it's not so gumdroppy, if that makes sense. I'm coming along that edge. I'm kind of hazing out that edge. So see how this line is moving like this? Basically doing that. So I'm getting rid of that hard line, that hard smile where you see right here. And I'm just fading it out. You see already how it creates so much dimension. Now, there are several ways we can continue, or you can leave this, because here's the tip. When I add the watercolor, what I would do is I would actually leave my petals white because I want them to be the white of the paper, and I would add my color behind. You see what happens when I add color behind? So when people think about drawing, they always think about the subject, but you also have to think about your negative space. So all this is negative space. This is our background. So you don't have to do this, but you can do it just to see what happens. But do you see how those petals, you don't need a lot of shading on them. You can continue to shade them. If you did, you would shade them closer to the middle. You might add a line or two as though it comes out. You know, there's a little crease in the petal. But when, if you wanted to, what I would do is you can use watercolor, which I'll do on the watercolor sheet, or you could use colored pencils, what might work lovely, or some pastels, something that comes in here. And in my mind, I envision a blue just because I think of the sky, or you could do like a paler shade of green. But what happens is now the white of the paper becomes the color of the flower, even though white isn't a color, it's really a tint. So, but that way, people say, oh, how do I make it lighter? That way your petals pop forward because light comes forward, dark recedes. So we're not going to worry too much about shading the rest of the petals. You can add to them if you want to, but this background will actually do more of the work than putting it onto our subject. So let's skip over. We're going to treat our gumdrop first on this one, and we're going to do the same thing. So this way you get to see me do it again. So over here, remember, we're going to color in that center. like that. And then we're going to make kind of our lines like a pinwheel or a peppermint candy. So either way, because remember, we're going to crisscross. So I'm going to start this way. They're going to come off like that. Go. Got our first pinwheel. And then remember, we're going to cross the other way. So it doesn't matter which way you start. Now I'm going to have you color it in, but I want you to be careful because my lines are a little crazy right here because my guidelines are in. The tops of my petals, remember we brought them up above the gumdrop. Be sure to leave those white. Don't put any shading on them. You're going to shade behind them. This is what I mean. So when I add my color to my gumdrop, I'm shading behind those petals. See right there? See how I get that? Right there. So I still have that arch. Is the one thing. Let me see. Oh, I don't think I can get it away. No, it's going to stay there. It's because that way you can see my notes. I always like when I'm teaching in the studio, I tell this a lot. I usually don't give erasers out because I like to see how the artist draws, and it helps me make any corrections or suggestions, or also understand that they know how to continue forward. So I actually like to have those lines on there, and they don't bother me if I see them in other people's artwork. I actually love to see pencil lines in watercolor. I love to see lots of drawing. It just helps me get into the mind of the artist. It's kind of fun to see their process. So, okay, now we're going to go forward. Remember, we always shade what's underneath. So coming from our pinwheel or our gumdrop center, we're going to shade those back petals in between, just like you did over there. But you have more petals in the back. So it comes up a little bit more. So we shade into those petals. And I'm going to concentrate on that back part first, while we jump into our foreshortened petals in the front. See how it's darker coming underneath where they're coming, right there, right against our center. We're shading lightly. Now, when we're shading, I am just doing this. I'm running my pencil along. You can use lines if you want. That's cross-hatching, hatching. Remember, we talked a little bit about that. So now I'm going to come along and I'm going to shade just these side petals. Because here's the tricky part. Instead, on the front petals, instead of shading up against the gumdrop, I want to shade on the very tips. So I want to shade on the petals underneath from the tips. Okay. Just from that very tip. Because those are coming at us because the light is falling on what is on the top. Okie doke. Now we can add some lines just like we did over here. What I do is I just throw a line in the center of the petal. And let me show you how I do that. It's almost a flick of my pencil. I put it down and I press hard and then I pull up. See how it's lighter right there? So think of it as like you're flicking your wrist. So put your pencil down, flick up. You'll get, as your pencil leaves the paper, you'll get this light tip. So it's like this. See how much thicker and how much thinner that is? That's how I do the lines in the center. That way it's fading out into the petal. So you can add those if you want to. You can even add them on the front. Just when you add them on the front, because your petal is like this, you're just adding just a little bit like that. Okay, the same thing of negative space would apply to this one. So when you fill in the background, watch how those petals start to pop. Again, you can do this with a color. You can do this with watercolor. I always think watercolor because it's easy and it's fast and you can drop it right in with your pencil. And it would look really pretty. So if you want to do that before the instruction sheets come out, you can still try it on your drawing so that you can see that negative space, but see how those petals pop out. Okay. Y'all are doing amazing. So now we're just going to address a little bit on our buds and a little bit on our leaves and a little bit on our stems. So let's actually do the stems right here. Anything, remember, that's up underneath. So the stem is going to be darker right here. See how I darken that stem in? And then the stem is going to fade to light. So dark right up under the flower and then fade it down. Dark under the flower and then it fades down. So even right underneath here, before we shade it, you know it's dark right up against there. Same thing over here. That is in shadow. So that's going to be darker right there. Already you get that popping forward. So since we're also talking about things that are underneath, the bottom of this is going to be a little shadowed. So just lightly shade that in on both of your cups, both of your buds. This would be green because it's part, but you can just lightly do that. And I'm just filling in the bottom. So if my cup is like this, I'm just filling in the bottom like that. Okay. And then where you're going to shade it next is going to be right in between those little tips. And then you're shading it up to the top, and the top's going to be light. So just in between. So remember, we drew that shape first. We're shading it. So same thing, petals there. Putting that. So now there are lots more. I mean, you can really get into shading, but I want you to give you the good basics to really help you bring your drawings to life. And the more you do it, the more you practice, the better you will be. So let's add a few more shades to our stems, and then we'll get our leaves. Remember, when something goes behind, it's in back, just like our under petals. So think about that right now. So this stem is behind. So I'm going to shade that a little bit there. See that? And this stem is behind. So I'm shading the stem behind, leaving the stem in the front, and that pushes it to the front. So light comes forward. Here's a good example. See how closer the petals look, then the background, dark, recedes. Light forward, dark recedes. So we'll shade a leaf, and I think you'll get the idea, and I'll kind of go through and shade a couple more, but it's the same idea. So we're going to start at the base of our stem and shade up a little bit, and then I shade 1/2 of the leaf from the stem, and you can choose to shade up or down. So remember, we put in our lines right here, our vein lines. I'm going to shade this very lightly, this half of the leaf. Okay. So all over, remember how we kind of went all over here? All over here, I'm going to shade this half of the leaf. That's because the leaves normally cup up. And so one side, see how my fingers look darker than my palm? Right here. And so this is basically what you're doing. You're doing the side that pops up. Then I darken right along where the veining is. And then I just darken the little edge tips of the other side of the leaf. This will give us enough information that your leaves will have some perspective. So I'll do it over here. I'm going to shade this side of the leaf. Oh, here's a good one. It goes behind the stem. So obviously it's going to be darker than the stem. Shade that side. See that? Then I'm going to darken it along the center vein and along any veins so I can see where those are. And I may just darken it so you can see the stem a little bit right there. And then I just shade that little tip along the edges, but not towards the center of the other. You got it. Same song, third verse. Let's do this side. Up, we're getting to our stem, so we're going to go behind. Guys, I hope you learn to love to draw. I really love drawing. But when you start looking at things and observing them, keep shading your leaves. Sorry, I can talk forever. But it becomes really exciting. And you can start looking at things and drawing them, and you start understanding tips and how to make things do different things. And it all starts sometimes with a how to draw flower class one summer in 2022. So I know I have some first timers in this class that haven't really done much. And so I'm excited that you joined me for this. And I hope this really prompts a love of drawing and more things. So how do I do it on here? I really shade towards one side still, and usually I shade towards the half side. So, and you can even put leaves in right here. Okay. You did it. You did it. You did it. I'm so proud of you. Way to go. And you have made daisies, and you've learned a lot about shading, and you've learned one of the hardest techniques in drawing, which is foreshortening. So Montaigne is an Renaissance artist, and he has the classic example of foreshortening. I'll send that out in the email. But it just will be interesting for you to see that. So, okay. It has nothing to do with flowers. It's just kind of the typical in art history. It's always what you teach for foreshortening. So let me take a look and see what we've done. Let's see, guys. Oh, hang on. Let me get to gallery. Fantastic. Mary, are you sheltering in place?